Let's take a look at Roman Crisis. This is another Rick Helly game that he's done with produced it, available print and play at Spotlight on Games. This is a card game, a pure card game, dealing with really the 3rd century crisis era in Rome. And it's going to be kind of a glory-taking game, rather like a history of the world type thing. Rather than one where you particularly want to finish in any position. You're going to have a series of people who all became emperors. Now, you're not going to probably... The way the game plays out, they're not all going to become emperors, and these are all double-sided, and we'll see how they operate. The first set are the older emperors, and then on the other side are later emperors who... come into play after the first set are deceased. Now, let's see. It starts out, this is actually an excellent edition of it. It is a print and play available game, but, oh geez, printers, shit. I can't remember what the company he's got it produced under, but you can get this regular poker quality card set, and I'll give you a link to that when I post this online. I can never remember it. It's definitely, in my view, a better alternative than printing out the game itself. But, you know, if you want to give it a shot or something, you can always make cards and on paper, slip them into sleeves with some kind of, sturdy backing or whatever, and they'll work pretty well. You'd have to double-side the printing for these guys. Let's see what you get. One of the things you get is a little advertisement, which lists, I think, all his games. I'm not sure. And you also get these victory point cards. They're meant to be cut out and turned into counters. I'll probably keep score on a piece of paper. I don't know that these are going to be particularly appealing to me as a concept to cut a card for that. But and one of the factors you also get, there's going to be 3 different types of ways of selecting an emperor at any given time, and those show up on there. All right, now. First thing, the rule book, and I don't know, if you buy the card edition, I think you still have to print out your rule book. You're just getting the cards here, but that's no big deal. The rule book does come with a really nice historical section with blurbs for all the different emperors, and this is a really intriguing period in Rome. Reading through the blurbs as opposed to, studying it in a history class where it doesn't quite come to your mind how quickly everything kind of fell apart during this period. And we're talking about the period between, we start with Maximinus Thrax, but that's after Severus and running to Diocletian. The empire was just such a mess during that period in terms of, you think about things like the Year of 4 Emperors and stuff. Well, this is just a 50-year period of that kind of chaos going on. The only game I know that really covers that in military detail is, let's see, one of those that comes up quite often on my little finds. Where are we? Imperium Romanum 2 here. And one of the things I was kind of hoping for, and it's not going to work with this, is something that I could kind of use as a scenario generator or setup for Imperium Romanum. I don't think that I can figure out a way to do that with this, but this looks like an interesting little card game all the same. So anyway, you have this neat historical blurb, and reading through them, seeing that quick fall, it's almost like a comedy, how bad things were. I mean, it must have been horrendous within the empire itself for that much chaos. Okay, so for the game itself, they say it's best in 4, and that's how I'm going to play it when I get to it. You have a deck full of influence cards, which are going to be different suits, essentially. Gold, which is kind of a wild card. Different invading groups like the Goths and what else do we have? Persia, Palmyra. These are major problem areas during that time. The SPQR cards, which are going to be internal problems or internal power, depending on how you want to look at it. And I think that's it. Just various military threats, as well as economic and political power. We have the different emperors, and they're going to all start set up on the table for a draft that we're going to see. Some offices that are available also for draft. We have to take a look at how things kind of begin here. And then there's also this empire selection system here. And finally, you've got your victory point markers if you choose to use them. He actually suggests using poker chips for it. I'll probably just write it on paper. I'm used to doing that kind of thing for games like Geronimo, for example. Okay, oldest player is the first dealer. He'll shuffle the influence deck and hand 2 out to each player. Then the dealer gets to decide which one of these selection methods takes place. If you want to make it fair, don't look at your cards before you decide, you know. All the candidate cards are set up on their A sides along with the 4 positions that are out here. The emperor is going to be separate. And beginning, okay. And then you're going to go through kind of a serpentine draft where each person is going to draft a card and take it face up in front of them. Starting with the first player, who will be to the left of the dealer, and then starting again after the last player, the dealer gets his card. Then the dealer gets a second card, and it goes back in reverse order. And then it goes again around. Now, this continues until each player has 2 candidates and all the offices have been taken, which to me seems to indicate that as long as people keep taking candidates and don't take offices, the process isn't going to stop until all the candidates are used up and then the offices have to be taken. So there's some, there's a decision point in there as to whether you feel like you have enough candidates and you want to start reducing the offices and taking them for their advantages, which are actually probably more useful in some ways than just a big pile of candidates. I don't think this is going to be like a Republic of Rome type game where it's just really important to have a bunch of different personalities on the table. And we'll see why when we see the game played. Okay, then what you're going to do is the dealer takes the deck, splits it exactly in half, and puts the remainder of the candidates, whichever ones were not picked, face up inside the deck. Now they're kind of weird because they're dual-sided unlike the rest of the deck, and we'll see how that kind of plays out. Okay, then what you're going to do is you deal out a number of cards, and these are all gone now. They're either in people's hands or in the midst of the deck. You deal out a number of cards from the influence deck equal to 3 times the number of players. So there's going to be a big hand of cards out here afterwards. And starting... Okay, if there aren't enough cards to do this, each player removes an influence card from his hand or the display from the hand or the display of the player to his left and places in the middle of the table. And you repeat this until you've filled out that 3 times required. So holding on to cards when the deck is down may not work. If there's more cards than are necessary, those left over are going to be used to reform the deck. Starting with the player to the left of the dealer, each player is going to draft a card into their hand. He likes drafting situations, right? He had the dice drafting in Inventing the Future, and now here he's got another drafting situation with the cards. And then you do that serpentine where you go back starting with the last player drafting another card all the way back to the first player. And then you do it one more time in the original order. Then the player to the left of the dealer, no player can draft a candidate if any other player has fewer than he does, unless it's the player's turn to draft and all that's left are candidates that are out there. Now remember, this deck isn't going to produce candidates until it gets to that midway point, and then it's going to produce a whole pile of them, which is kind of weird. At least that's what I think. We'll see if there's a reshuffle. I've read through these, but I don't remember there being one. If a candidate is drafted, you immediately put them into play in front of yourself, and if the deck gets exhausted, you gather up to the discards and form a new deck. Now that's a little weird, right? It doesn't say whether to shuffle. I assume so, because otherwise things will get clustered together. Okay. Then you're going to bid on who gets to be the emperor. And the way you do this could also cause additional positions to fall immediately. The legatus. It could also cause people to have their position bumped. For example, the current legatus could turn into the emperor, which means then the legatus has to be assigned. And the other positions, other than legatus, which is an automatically assigned one, the other positions will wait until the emperor gets to assign them. And he has rules which determine how he assigns them. Well, who gets to be the emperor? That's going to be based on whichever one of these was selected previously. Remember, at the beginning of the game, the dealer gets to select one of these. And that's going to decide if it's the most military power, the most power in the politics realm, or, somewhat weirder, being able to bribe the Praetorians. One version of the game, maybe the print and play version, but not this kind of classy one, has this selection method card, which will be used and rotated into position to indicate which one is going to be chosen. But we'll see. It works essentially the same. It's just here you can stack them and put one on top. It's available. Okay. Starting with the person to the left of the dealer, each person has to put forward an eligible candidate for emperor. The eligible candidate has to have a non-zero rating in the selection method taken. Now for SPQR and military, that's actually written right here. Actually for Praetorian too. So military has a rating of 1 for this guy, Praetorian 3. He would not be eligible for SPQR. However, if there are no eligible candidates whatsoever, all candidates will be considered eligible and you can put anyone forward, regardless of what their status is. And these are going to be starting votes, points in favor of that person becoming emperor. So, your starting value is going to be your base value here, plus if you have an ability from one of your offices. Now, when you take an office, you have to, in the initial setup, you have to assign it to someone who's eligible for it. So, for example, this one is only eligible to someone who has military influence, and that states here, no, it doesn't. So, for example, this guy would be raised from a 1 military up to a 4 by taking this. He couldn't be given SPQR, so you can't select this at that starting point in the game. And we'll see elsewhere where there's an effect there. And Praetorian prefect is Praetorian influence. Okay. So if I had the Cav commander under him, he would have an initial military value of 4, which would be equivalent to, say, Aurelian here, who's good as an emperor, well, as a military choice for an emperor. And these different choices are basically to indicate there were a lot of different ways that the Romans picked their emperor during this period. Sometimes it was an emperor of the legions, effectively. The legions declared in favor of an emperor, probably with the general's consent, but there have been indications that some of these guys didn't want to be emperor, but they were kind of forced into it because their legion wanted control over them. So that's one way that someone could get drafted into being emperor. SPQR is basically sometimes the Senate just elected someone as an emperor, sometimes a military leader, sometimes someone just based on, you know, family ties, or who stood from the Senate itself within Rome. And then the Praetorian, usually they would, you know, assassinate the previous emperor and just declare this guy's emperor. One thing to note, you spend one turn as emperor. So once you are because of the rapid turnover of the different emperors, once you get to be emperor, you get to score some points for that, and then you go away. The only other way to score points other than emperor is to be legatus, and you don't disappear when you're legatus. So that's a way to kind of get a recurring source of points. And the legatus has the ability to refuse to be accepted as emperor under some conditions. Let's see, where are we here? Okay, so you look for the person who has the highest rating, and he's got the biggest bid. And you look first, starting from the leftmost player, or the left-hand player to the dealer, the current dealer. Now, that person, there could be a tie between, you know, different people, which is why it matters which order you look. So it's the first person in that sequence who has the most. And then the next person in order has the option to either withdraw their candidate or up their bid on their candidate from their starting bid. So this guy has a starting bid of 4. If this guy's next, I could throw more points in to say, yeah, I want him to be the military. Okay. So, in order to bid for military, you can only use Goths, Palmyra, and Persians, the different military powers. Now, these combine kind of to serve as both the enemy and the forces facing that enemy. So they're kind of a mixed kind of influence. I stated that wrong. Those 3 contribute to the military power. SPQR contributes to if you have an SPQR, or a political-based election taking place. The Praetorian election uses none of these cards, but there's the wild card, there's the gold cards. And gold cards count towards everything. What I've seen is gold tends to be fairly low, though. They're the only way you can get additional points in the Praetorian elections. If you're unwilling to exceed the highest person, you have to pass, and you drop out of the election, and you pull your candidate back to yourself. Whoever ends up with the winning bid, as it were, ends up as the emperor, and he'll get a bunch of extra powers, and he gives up any position he held previously and becomes the emperor. Okay. As soon as the emperor is selected, then I'm trying to see if the legatus gets declared right here. I thought he did. Yeah, I think the legatus gets picked at this point. Where's that automatic somewhere? No, that's done automatically. Okay, that's done later. So at this point, the first player who got to pass gets to choose which one of these selection methods is used next. So you have kind of this, like the priority deal in an 18xx game, this ability to step back and say, you know what, I can't win this one, or I don't want to fight for this one, but I can select what the best choice for me for the next election will be. And looking at your cards, you can kind of make that decision. And then you just stack the set of these for which one you want it to be. Okay. Then the emperor has to assign offices. First, he takes his card for himself. Then the legatus, whether it's available or not, I guess, is assigned to whichever person other than the emperor has the highest military rating on the game on the board. This doesn't include any bid points, I don't believe. I'm not sure, because bid points can stay in some cases. We'll take a look as we go on. And now the remaining offices have to be assigned. Yeah, I think you keep your office. I don't know. If the new emperor or legatus were holding offices, or if any offices were vacant, these are now reassigned as follows. First, the player who has an eligible candidate for the office. Remember, you can't be in the Senate if you don't have SPQR. You can't be in Praetorian if you don't have that. Whatever. So whoever has the fewest offices, including the emperor as an office, gets that position. If there's a tie there, it goes to whoever has the least victory points currently. And if it's still tied, it's going to go closest to the emperor's right, going in kind of the reverse order of all the other processes in the game. If there are multiple eligible candidates belonging to the player chosen, the owning player gets to decide who gets the office. If the candidate already has an office, the owner may relinquish it, in which case he's reassigned. Then we have crises, which come out. Well, there's going to be a group of cards usually left over at the end of the last turn that'll be unresolved crises, but let's look. These will be a pile of cards that are a challenge to the empire. There's 4 varieties: Persia, Goths, Palmyra, those are all wars, and then a domestic crisis, which will be reflected with the SPQR cards, which now I'm having trouble finding. The others have horsemen and stuff on, soldiers on them of some sort or another. The strength of the crisis will be the number on all the cards for it. So for example here, Palmyra would be a strength 6, Persia would be a strength 5. It's possible that there might be some gold on one of these as well, so now Persia goes up to a 7. Now, each player takes one card secretly from their hand and puts it face down. That includes the emperor. These cards will all be simultaneously revealed and then added to the appropriate crisis. If they're of the right type of another crisis out there, they get added to that crisis. If they're of a new type, like let's say the Goths aren't on the board and somebody flips up a Goth, well, now there's a crisis with the Goths that hadn't been present from the last turn. If there's gold, then those get assigned to the highest crisis after all the non-gold cards have been assigned. So if somebody puts a gold down under this circumstance, say the Goths came out at the same time, well, then we'd count, and there's a 7 here, a 6 here, a 3 here. The gold would be added to the Persian crisis. Then the emperor is allowed to try to solve one of the outstanding crises. He has his choice of which one to go for. He can pick whatever one he likes. It doesn't matter what his attributes are. And he can play cards from his hand that are appropriate to the crisis. They either have to be the same type as the crisis itself. So if I want to fight Persia, I have to use Persian cards. Or I can use gold as the wild card here. These are added to any cards that have already been played for the election of the emperor, I guess. And you total up the emperor's played cards, not including the ratings on his card itself. So his military rating isn't going to count, plus the ability listed on the emperor's card. Special ability listed on the emperor. So for example, this guy, he can cancel a Persia card for each gold. I I guess each point of gold rather than each gold card, but maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it's each gold card. That's not clear. There is a fact, but I tried to click on it. I can't get it. I'll look online and see if I can clarify that. Okay. So, if the Emperor's total is higher than the total of the crisis, he eliminates the crisis and it's gone. And he'll get a number of victory points equal to the ranking of the crisis. The worst crisis is worth 21, and second 15, and so on. You can't defeat a crisis that doesn't exist, though, and say, well, I go fourth place, right? If you're not able to completely defeat the crisis, then you defeat as much of it as you can. And in that case, you get 1 point for each card of the crisis that you discarded, which means you probably want to succeed at defeating a crisis rather than go for the crisis, the most powerful crisis if you can't beat it. You want to get the best one that you can beat. Perhaps. We'll see, because there are some cases where maybe that won't be the case. Then the legatus. The person who's the legatus can address any single war, the Persians, Goths, or Palmyra, by playing 1 or 2 cards applicable to the war. These can come from those played on the legatus already, or from the player's hand, or both. So anything that was played, say, on the legatus previously to try to get him elected to emperor would have to kick around because he has the option to use 1 or 2 of them. But he could also pull from his own hand, which is probably where the votes came from. If the legatus is able to defeat the crisis, he gets based on the ordering of the crisis. Note that his values are less than those of the emperor, and in a sense that makes sense because the emperor, if he eliminates the top crisis for 21 points, you wouldn't want to give 21 to getting what was the second greatest crisis. However you want to look at that. If the legatus fails to destroy the entire crisis, he gets 1 point for each card that he managed to discard. Okay. When you destroy part of a crisis, but don't manage to get all of it, and the remaining cards are just gold cards, they're going to get assigned now to the highest remaining crisis, creating, a new big problem. Okay. Then the emperor dies. He's going to automatically die, and he gets flipped over and dropped into the discard pile. If he was already on his B side, he gets removed from the game when he dies. All the influence cards that were assigned, that were associated with the emperor, go to the discard pile. The player with the most points becomes the last player. It seems like the legate, or the legatus, gets to keep any cards he has associated with them. So he might become a bigger and bigger problem in terms of becoming the emperor. Now, there's a word here. A canny player may choose to avoid becoming emperor by trying to hold the legatus office. I don't think you can do that if you're the best candidate for emperor. So I think other people can try to force the legatus to become the next emperor. I don't think you can just refuse it outright. Okay, then the dealer changes. Whoever has the most cards becomes the last player. I think last player is the dealer. And that'll make him the easiest person for people to beat on. The deck is taken by the player having the most victory points. If there's a tie, the deck goes to the tied player of the current dealer's choice other than himself. He wouldn't want it. The second time that an emperor is removed from the game, i.e. a B-level emperor dies, the game will be over. the last player who was an emperor gets 3 bonus victory points, and then whoever has the most points wins. If there's a tie, the person having the most total value in influence cards in hand and on any current candidates wins. So if you play influence cards on any candidates, they hold on to them. That's pretty clear. Okay. I had another issue I wanted to ask, but I don't remember what it was, didn't I? I don't remember. I think I resolved it. We'll pretend I did. And that is it. And then there's, as usual, with Rick's games, a nice example of play, which I looked through, and that helps you understand the context. I didn't find that as necessary with Founding Fathers, but with the 2 print and plays, it's obvious they're not quite up to the same level of scrutiny for, hey, let's make sure if we're printing a rule book, we get it completely right. So, but overall the rules seem fairly understandable. I don't remember what my issue was anymore, and we'll see if it still is. All right, let's give this one a shot.